Good to meet with you. Thank you for joining me. Um, we have a few, I would say we have a few synergies. We met for this is our first proper conversation, but you're at XCO2. I used to be there. We're also both ex-EDE, environmental design and engineering alumni. So it's good to, see those alignments. But yeah, so maybe Sarah, as a start, a little bit about yourself, like your background, um, how you've kind of moved into passive house design or environmental design in general, and yeah, like a little bit about your general journey, if you like.
Yeah. Uh, well, first, thanks so much, Peter, for inviting me to be here and talk about all things Passive House, as we all like to geek out. So, myself, so I'm currently an associate director at XCO2. XCO2 are kind of an MEP environmental consultancy, as you know, you work there. We work across different sectors trying to, well, in a nutshell, reduce the environmental impact of buildings.
Mm,
Um, myself, my background is architecture, so
mm.
I'm a trained whatever registered architect. I did my degree in Portugal, where
Okay,
I came
yeah.
from. For all the ones asking, where's that accent from? And yeah, and quite early on my degree, I got really attracted by this kind of relationship between of buildings and the environment. I had this a classic, a really good teacher on this kind of environmental design module, and
Mm,
I got really kind of captivated by this kind of buildings and the natural environment and the performance and bringing daylight, solar, again, all of that kind of combining, just not looking at building as a design part of it.
mm.
So I worked many years as an architect, but there was always this kind of thing at the back of my
Calling,
mind.
yeah,
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 it's
yeah,
kind of
yeah.
a bit, yeah, a bit this calling that was not design that I really wanted, but more the performance and actually
Mm,
understanding how buildings work and how people actually experience buildings and use buildings and all that. So I tried to shift when I was in Portugal. I tried to shift into energy performance, and this was at the time where it's kind of the energy performance certificate, and that's kind of all regulations
mm.
from the EU came about. So I trained as a SAP assessor, let's
Okay,
say,
yeah, yeah.
whatever the equivalent in Portugal, and I worked for a company doing EPCs, which very quickly kind of lost. Yeah, it did. Yeah, lost its spark, let's
Yeah.
say, as yeah, again, it was not design, it was not really, it was just like assessing things and not kind of really promoting energy efficiency in a way. So long story short, I researched a couple of masters and I came across the UCL Master in Environmental Design Engineering, which were both
Yeah.
alumni. And yeah, I also wanted to kind of leave Portugal, get another international experience. I had lived in Norway and in Japan, so I just wanted
Wow.
to again kind of live abroad again in a nutshell.
Crossing the globe, trying to get your footprint
Yeah,
everywhere. Wow,
yeah,
that's really cool.
exactly.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So yeah, I joined the UCL Masters and was absolutely transformational.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was everything I was looking for. It was such a learning experience. Yeah, it was super exciting. Made lots of friends and just like learn a ton. And yeah, and yeah, kind of loved also living in London, and I've been here since. So yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah, no, I agree. I think there's definitely from my point of view with EDE, it's like it is transformational. It's interesting, isn't it? Because like my experience, I came from civil engineering background in another university in England, civil engineering, then moved into EDE. So I sort of found it by chance as well. And I don't know, I don't know if you agree, but it's like there's so many people from different backgrounds, different
Yeah.
cultures, different backgrounds in terms of education as well. So
Mhm.
you're talking about being an architect. There was, as you might have experienced well, there's people doing building service engineering, maybe the odd weird structural engineer like myself who sort of found our way in there somehow, and environmental designers. And yeah, there's that kind of melting pot, isn't there, of like, I guess everyone who wants to do the right thing or like improve energy efficiency, or at least I guess my point of view was like, I'm interested in this space. I want to learn more about it.
Yeah.
Let me try it. And then suddenly I realized, oh, so building services is like the one where you cut energy, and good architecture and that kind of thing. So yeah, I definitely understand where you're coming from on that
Yeah, I
aspect.
think the
Yeah.
masters has that kind of, yeah, attracts people that are really kind of motivated and want to learn and want to, they're not just there like, I don't know, doing a master for the sake of doing a master. So I
Yeah.
think that was a good level of energy, and I think has sort of like progressed into my kind of working experience everywhere I worked.
Mm.
In this industry in sustainability, there's this level of energy of people that want to do things, and
Mm.
that's really motivating.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
and you
yeah,
know what's really interesting as well about what you say is being an architect, coming from that background, I suppose, you're doing your work, and I love that there's this calling of I want better performance of buildings, because it seems to always be the case that, architecture underpins everything. Good architecture will dictate essentially your energy performance, right?
yeah.
And like, it's so important. And there's so many elements to architecture. There's the aesthetics, there's so many other elements, and having that kind of part in you that is looking at energy performance at the same time is like, it's so powerful, isn't it? Because you do have the influence, and if you're sort of driving it, if you like, from the top, in terms of if you're the principal designer of the project, it can really filter down to the outcomes, I suppose.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think buildings are so important, and they're where we spend our, that's where we are now. That's where
Yeah.
we kind of spend our life, and they can have such a massive importance and impact on our life, even on our well-being and how we feel about things. But then I kind of was super interested in the comfort and in the energy performance and in kind of the impact on the wider, climate change and
Yeah.
carbon reduction that is needed and kind of all this impact.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, absolutely. Yeah, that's really interesting. Were you introduced to let's say Passivhaus, or kind of PHPP, all that kind of stuff during your masters, or was that
Yeah,
later?
so I heard about I did a module on retrofit, I think,
Mm,
that had was where we could learn PHPP and have a case
same. Yeah.
study
Yeah, yeah.
with, I think, was Sophie Pelsmakers that
Sophie, yeah,
that
yeah.
that kind
Tick,
of
tick,
helped us,
yeah.
kind of taught us how to use PHPP, and was super interesting. And then one thing I really liked, and I had done it before, was that you take the same building and then you test it on different weathers.
Yeah.
So we had this play, and it was like, imagine if it's in north of England, and then imagine if it's in south of France, and then obviously the same building performs completely different. And then we had to think of all the kind of design changes that we had to do, and yeah, I kind of really liked it. And then my first job post master was with an architectural practice that was specialized on
Okay.
passive house buildings. So it was very, very quick from the start. I was like working on yeah, detailed design buildings and going to sites.
Was that
So
Bear Architects, was it?
yeah, that
Yeah,
was
yeah,
BR
yeah. Okay, yeah.
Architects. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, in East London, right? It's
yeah,
yeah,
around
yeah, yeah,
Newton Green, where I still
yeah.
live.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Ended
Very
up
fashionable.
dictating a lot of things in my life, actually, that first job. Um, yeah, which was a massive learning curve. It was
Mm.
super exciting, and yeah, at the time there were already a couple, but Justin and the team at Beer Architects were some of the pioneers of bringing
Yeah.
the standards to UK and to London specifically.
Mm.
So yeah, yeah, and was, yeah, kind of straight on site with a contractor that had never done a passive house, and
Mm.
and a lot of material being imported from Germany and Italy,
Okay.
and it was super super interesting, and yeah, and a massive learning curve. Yeah, so yeah, and then also at that time they were the practice had received funding from the Technology Strategy Board to do
Mm.
building performance evaluation
Yeah.
on properties that had been built to Passivhaus standard. Well,
Okay.
the whole project was to kind of low energy buildings, but BR actually had got the funding to monitor um, two houses they had built in Wales.
Okay.
And then I was lucky enough to actually be involved in the data collection and looking at that, and I kind of helped wrote the final report, which which we can go into it. But I think building performance is actually, I say, my first love.
Yeah, yeah, I'm with you there. My dissertation
Uh,
was on the I think the what was it, retrofit for the future, and I
yeah,
think
yeah,
I
yeah,
learned
yeah.
from that is like because I think on that process, um, so they did a whole bunch of projects with different
Hmm.
design teams, and XCO2
Yeah.
was one of them. Actually, I had a chat
Hmm.
with Tom about it, and they designed to SAP, which at the time I wasn't aware what SAP was, and then I was understanding like, okay, so they predicted 80% carbon reduction for all these retrofits because that was like the sort of the aim and testing different technologies to get to that result. And then in the operation, it was more like, I don't know, 0 to 30 or 40%. I was just trying to understand like
Why so different?
what's this issue? It seems to be this performance gap,
Yeah.
which 10 years later we talk about all the time, which is, it's not great
Yeah.
that we talk about it, but at least we talk about it. But yeah, like I think just to add why I'm saying that is like, yeah, the whole post-occupancy evaluation, I think that was it, the bus surveys and things
Yeah.
like that, and
That
and
was my
trying to actually
dissertation, was on the
understand.
bus survey, actually.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. No, but you learn a lot, right? You learn a lot about because you look at the energy, don't you? And then you also look at um, the more qualitative feedback from the users and stuff like that, isn't it? So
Yeah.
it kind of helps understand the building a lot more.
Yeah, yeah, and
Yeah.
this funding we got, and the analysis was super in depth. Had lots of like technical assessments, like co-heating tests and all of that, understanding heat
Mm.
loss and the monitoring, and also quite a lot of like interviews with the residents. And it was funny you were saying that because I recall that there were two houses side by side. They were slightly different, but pretty much aligned. There was a few
Mm.
differences, and then they ended up having quite different energy performance, and
Okay.
was so down to how the residents use their buildings.
Yeah.
So in one of the houses, they were super excited about Passive House. They
Yeah.
bought into anything. They were like geeking out on everything, even like going beyond and kind of turning things off and
Mm.
learning how to manage things. And the other house was just like, well, it's my house. I don't care. Like,
Okay.
much
Okay.
less involvement. So, for example, they had MVHR and all of that, but they
Yeah.
always kept their windows open, and they
Right.
always wanted, oh, I need some fresh air. So they didn't really like understood
Yeah.
all of this. So ended up that the house where the residents were super engaged had a much lower heating demand than even we predicted. It was like they were on like around 9 or 10 or whatever because they were super engaged, and the other one was much higher than
Yeah.
was predicted, around 25 something. So it was so interesting to see how actually occupants can dictate also the energy performance, and they
Yeah.
which kind of comes to say like people need to learn what's in their house and how they can kind of, and there's a lot of like cultural change around MVHR and all of
Yeah.
that kind of
Yeah, and we need
is
to bring
still.
people with us, isn't it? Like we need to kind of.
Yeah.
I remember there was like some kind of lecture or something, and they would had showed some examples. I think I don't even Rob Bunn on the Bizria where he had like
Yeah,
the
yeah,
examples of controls, and then there's some examples where like e- they don't even know. I think the people who installed it don't necessarily understand how it's used, and I guess there's always the risk that if we overcomplicate controls, I mean, in my opinion, controls is so crucial,
so
and
crucial.
and I think
Yeah.
working on the contractor side, I can understand like depending on how projects are like procured and stuff, like the ideal situation during concept is like you've got this, let's say this supplier who has this full package of controls and BMS and everything, and it all works well together. And then you see sometimes in practice, depending on how projects carry forward, sometimes those packages are subcontracted, and if you don't keep a
Yeah.
hold on that,
Yes.
it starts to become very, it clashes and stuff like that. So Yeah, like I think it's really interesting
There's
what you say.
yeah,
Yeah.
there's an art to the BMS for sure on larger buildings, but even on residential buildings. So one thing that actually they did at Bear was they created like this A3 sheet that explained everything that was in their
Yeah.
house and explained what they could touch and not touch and kind of
Yeah.
thing, and try to really simplify all the tech and everything that people had to do to minimize any kind of messing around with things
Yeah.
and for people to understand yeah what they have. But I still have like lots of friends that live in modern flats with MVHRs and they're like, oh, what is this big box? They don't.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well,
Yeah.
this is your ventilation system. Let me guide you through it. And when did you change your filters to start with?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think it might even be cultural to the UK. I mean, I think in terms of ventilation, the first I really learnt about it was during EDE, like in terms of understanding the details of it. And I don't know, in my opinion, it's kind of like maybe it's brushed over, or like you have your MEP designer or your engineer who knows the details about like
Mm,
the system setup. And I guess environmental designers like ourselves, we understand the benefit. Let's say if you have heat recovery on your fresh air ventilation, especially if you're in an airtight building, it can make a huge difference to people with allergies as well. and
yeah,
and just
absolutely.
it's an amazing concept, and it's energy saving. But it's interesting the example you say about the other house having openable windows because they need ventilation. And I think it's almost, yeah, we don't really, we sort of, it's the human psyche, I think. It's like when I was doing the Passivhaus designer course, it was interesting that Sally Godber, one of the
Hmm.
teachers, she made a good comment about the idea that like humans, we're really rubbish at understanding when we need ventilation until it's sort
Yes.
of too late. And you hear terms like stuffy. It's like it's becoming stuffy. And I think normally when it's stuffy, you're way past the point at which you should have started to have that kind of fresh air, because it's something, yeah, we find difficult perhaps to understand, or to feel, if that makes sense. So yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it? It's like that whole journey about trying to educate, I suppose, the masses of the benefits of a mechanical ventilation system with heat recovery, and the idea that you don't have to open your windows in the
Yeah.
winter. Like, you're getting your fresh air. Like,
Yeah.
don't worry about it. It's yeah.
Yeah, it was a cultural aspect and they wanted to do it. But the one thing we also learn is that like if you design a really energy efficient building, even if it's like say wrongly used in a sense, it's still incredibly efficient. So they
Yeah.
were above what we kind of the Passivhaus targets and all of
Mm,
that. But
mm,
I remember compare that kind of average um, UK housing
mm.
at the time, even this wrongly used house in a sense
Yeah.
was just 30% of the kind of a typical house. So
Mm,
they were still incredibly efficient and they were
yeah.
still incredibly yeah, kind of low energy bills and all of that. So I think yeah, uh, in a sense we would all it's good to educate people and understand what they have, but at the same time just use your house as you want.
Yeah.
And there are all of these that will make you pay less energy and you don't need it and all of that. But yeah, in a sense, if it's well designed and if it's a good building, you know, it will still be quite efficient.
So yeah,
Yeah.
100% agree. And the whole fabric first, which is used all the time, but it makes sense.
Yeah.
You make the building as energy efficient as possible. We can add on those smart systems if we want to, but you're right. It's that you get the base right. Everything else is small
Yeah.
corrections. You can educate someone one day about how to use it properly, and then suddenly it goes down. The energy goes down, but at least you've got that base that you don't need to
Exactly.
alter with,
Yeah.
isn't it? Yeah, no, 100%
Yeah.
agree. And I suppose, so moving on from that, so you got that experience at Bear Architects. I suppose in at the deep end, you're working on
Yeah.
PHPPs, which is a mammoth tool, right? And you're going on site educating people. So then I suppose you moved to XCO2 at some point, and then you're kind of leading
Uh,
the passive
yeah, it
house,
was way,
or
way, was more winded
yeah,
than
okay, no,
that.
interesting. That's always
But
good, isn't it?
yeah, so uh, I love the experience at Beer, but I also wanted to more like geek out on PHP, do energy modeling, do all of that.
Yeah.
So I moved into consultancy.
Okay.
Still always with a kind of with a foot on Passivhaus, but I work with Sturgis carbon profiling.
Okay.
They did we had a couple of NR in central London, which
Nice.
was like super interesting, and also some POE work with them. Then, well, Simon kind of folded the company in a sense, and then I moved into XCO2. Before that, I sort of actually started teaching at university.
Oh,
So
nice.
I've been I was lecturing at University of Suffolk, and then at Coventry, kind of leading on technical modules
Okay. Related
for
to,
architectural degrees.
okay, architect. So like
So
looking at kind of the environmental side of
yeah,
architecture and yeah, okay.
exactly. So
And
I was
how's that experience been? Like, are you
that was
finding that it's changing over time or yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I loved it, and I still
Mm,
like love teaching so much.
mm,
And there's a again a great energy around kind of I was undergrad and master students, but there's some kind of ingenuity. How do you say it? There's like
yeah,
this
yeah,
kind of
yeah.
eagerness, kind of
Passion and
passion, and then you
yeah.
explain, and this is this whatever. I could talk about past files, and there'd be like questions. Oh, why aren't we all doing all these buildings like that? And I was
Great
like,
question.
well, great question. Write to your MP.
Yeah, exactly.
So though it was super, it was great experiences. So I was they were teaching the kind of like technical modules in the architectural courses. I think I've seen a great difference on
Mm,
the architecture education and even on the architectural practices
okay.
since I started working here in the UK. It was a sort of like architect does the design, and there's this person that does this
Yeah.
energy
Add on.
statement or does
Yeah.
this kind of thing.
Mm.
Of course, there were always a few architectural practices focus on low energy buildings, and they were but let's say like the general
The
approach
general feel, yeah,
was a
yeah,
sort
yeah.
of like, oh, what's a U value kind of thing, like explain all of this. And now, my God, the
Oh,
conversation has shifted massively.
that's
Architects are
great. Yeah.
so interested in actually on the performance of their buildings, on the impact of their buildings, and the conversation has moved like completely. It's completely different. The majority of architects we work with are super interested in designing better, in refining their designs, in getting all our input,
Mm.
and so it becomes much more interesting, let's
That's
say,
great. And
work.
yeah, no. So do you find that's, I suppose, do you find that that's with like the kind of the architects coming through in terms of like the students that you see, or do you see that like as a general feel, even let's say the management, the more experienced people within architectural firms, do you see them as like coming on board, or is it kind of being driven from the ground up? Like, what's
Good
your feel?
question. Good question. Uh, Definitely, I think the younger generations are just like super clued up and like,
Yeah,
there is this is the way to do things, and why aren't we doing things like that? But a lot of leadership, I think it takes you know the culture and the ethos of a company to, needs everyone to be on board
yeah,
for things. So it's a lot kind of from leaderships that people like, almost, well, a lot of practices these days have all like a sustainability group or a head of
yeah.
sustainability. So they are kind of capturing that, and then in quite a lot you see that sort of like very quickly trickles down to the whole kind of
Mm.
practice, because all the architects are quite interested in understanding this better, and there's been so many discussions about it, and so many involvement, different groups like LETI or
Yeah,
ACAN or even the RIBA kind of
yeah,
promoting through the Sustainable Futures Group and all that, promoting this engagement of architects in the impact of their buildings,
yeah.
which makes total sense. Yeah.
100%. Yeah. I mean, when I saw when the REBA 2030 outcomes kind of guidance came out, I think what is it? It's like 2019 or that kind of thing. That to me, that was a great message that,
Exactly.
REBA is like, which all architects are essentially prescribed to, or, that's what we use as REBA plan of works for designs and everything else. So it's a very influential, let's say, organization pushing for that. I think to me, that was a great sign because I
Yeah.
think Letty were doing the their initial kind of guidance on pushing initially for London low energy and then moving more nationally. But that movement, I feel like it was quite good, wasn't it? It was starting to push the boundaries or the message around the climate crisis, and we have to design low energy buildings. We can't just do what we've been doing for so long with the regulations. We need to go further. We need to push for operational outcomes. So
Yeah,
yeah.
because there's this idea that there is what like sustainable architecture and architecture, and I think I always hated that. There is no sustainable architecture. There is architecture. Point.
Yes.
And all
There's no
buildings have
niche there. There's
there's no
just this.
niche. There's architecture. There's
Yeah.
buildings. All buildings have an impact in the
Mm.
environment, and it's everyone's responsibility to do their best in a sense. So it's all buildings are sustainable, let's say, or
Yeah.
have to be. They have to be sustainable. It should be a non-negotiable. And I think I'm optimistic. We're getting there. A lot of people we work with amazing architects, and they're super aligned.
Yeah. No, that's love that. That brings me on to, I suppose, yeah. So I guess your journey in terms of now and how you're seeing, let's say, building performance with I suppose a specific microscope on, let's say, Passivhaus projects or project
Mm,
Passivhaus goals. Like how has your general experience been? I suppose joining XCO2, or let's say the last, I don't know, 7 or 8 years, or specifically maybe the last few years, where I guess from my perspective, and you could correct me as well, like there does seem to be not necessarily a critical mass, but there's a real building of
yeah,
Passivhaus targets, councils, let's say uh, enough people in positions of influence to say, no, we want a Passivhaus building. We want, all the buildings in a borough, let's say, we want to be Passivhaus, or sorry, not all buildings, but let's say all residential
yeah,
buildings, or maybe all buildings, to Passivhaus certification. Because I think from my perspective, that needs to be the driving force. I think we talk a lot about, it's the client requirements. What are the employer's requirements? Like, what do we have to do? And then more and more clients and authorities, I don't know if brave is the right word, but kind of putting their head above the parapet and saying,
yeah.
guys, we know the benefits of this. Please do it. So I guess that's a long way of saying I've seen that there does seem to be a movement now, or enough impetus, maybe just in London, or certain counties like Exeter and stuff like that. But yeah, what's been your general kind of
Yeah.
experience?
Um, so yeah, so I've been working in Passive House, yeah, almost 15 years. So it kind of
Mm,
there was always interest in this, but there was a lot of like push or like convincing like or
mm,
the odd interested client or the odd kind of like large landlord doing some pilot projects and then seeing that those benefits. I think there's been a great drive from local authorities,
yeah.
and and you can see because a lot of people is like, oh yeah, that's a great building, but like from an investment point of view, like who's gonna have the benefits of that? It's
Mm,
the end
mm,
user.
mm.
So for speculative developments, it tends to be like, oh, why am I going to spend that money on it? Which I keep thinking that still doesn't make any sense because, yeah, if you are still delivering a better building, it's, it should be on your, but anyway, another
Yeah,
conversation.
yeah, yeah. No, definitely.
um, but yeah, for local authorities, this is sort of, yeah, it's a great investment because they um, will get a product that kind of works as designed, like with potentially lower maintenance and kind of issues to maintain, and happier tenants, low energy bills, and kind of no rent arrears and all of that kind of those benefits. I think
Mm,
it's makes sense. I think there's been a lot of like I think showing that passive house can also be beautiful buildings and kind of award-winning buildings and like the example on Goldsmith Street or even Beer Architect. There's so many beautiful passive houses out there, showing that it can be um, beautiful,
mm,
efficient, and kind of and deliver. Um, has created a lot of like attraction. And I think the Passivhaus Trust does a great work on
Mm.
engaging local authorities and explaining the benefits of Passivhaus, and kind of helping them on their journey for
Yeah.
them to kind of engage with architects and consultants like us to do those projects. So yeah, we've seen at XCO2, we've seen like a continuous kind of growth of interest,
Yeah.
and we
Great.
and I think it then sort of like snowballs. We kind of grow our
Mm.
expertise, we grow our experience, and then we just attract more clients. So yeah, we're
And isn't
currently
yeah.
working on maybe a good 7 or 8.
Okay. And is it all
Yeah.
residential, or are you finding starting to, go into the other sectors?
It's definitely extending to other sectors. At
Yeah.
XU2, we work a lot on the social housing
Yeah.
work and a lot in London.
Hmm.
So the majority, well, all our passive houses are residential.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Hmm.
our residential schemes, small schemes, bigger schemes. Yeah.
Yeah. Nice. Perfect. That's
Yeah.
really, really encouraging, isn't it? And I suppose so.
Hmm.
In terms of, I guess the nitty gritty of like the day to day. So, you know, S Sarah, you're like pushing the passive house process. You're doing the PHPP. You're liaising with maybe the MEP consultant, the architect. Like, how have you found it in terms of day to day, like being that passive house expert? Do you find on most projects people are like they're aligned, there is that real buy-in, or have you finding like on some projects you can tell there's certain parties, let's say, where it's like, oh, we know we have to do this because the client says it, but they're kind of being a bit resistive. Like,
Oh, it's a
yeah,
mixed bag. It's a
yeah,
mixed bag. We work with, as a consultant, end up working with many different types of clients and
yeah,
architects. So it's a mixed bag. You
yeah.
have you
You
have
know
the
the ones
ones
that love it and the ones that
you
okay, we
have
have to do it. Yeah.
exactly, you have the ones that are like, I don't understand why we have to do this. And then so it's a slowly kind of like engagement yeah, in sort of like bringing them on a journey in a sense,
Yeah, yeah.
that being sometimes clients like want it but don't really know the process or understand that. So we do a lot of kind of early engagement, early
Yeah.
presentations, explaining what's the standard, what's the key aims, trying to kind of demystify
Mm.
and kind of explain yeah, the process and the how what's passive house and what are the kind of main aims. Um, and sort of like show them that we're there as like the Passivhaus consultant. We're there to kind of help them on their journey. So the client, the architect team, and kind of everyone, and kind of sort of bring them on board. And then with the architects, it's the same thing. We go a bit more technical on them. We go like straight on what are the kind of um, key guidance that will help deliver passive house.
Mm.
And this would go from looking at the sites that we have and what's kind of optimized orientation, form factor, looking at what are kind of the
Mm.
shading around. So placement on the site is can be quite crucial,
Yeah.
and to be honest, a massive challenge in London. A lot of our projects are infill projects, so
Yeah.
they have this tiny little piece of like garages that are going to be demolished,
Oh yeah.
and
Yeah. That's the bread and butter for us as well. Yeah.
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 So, yeah, very difficult to actually, and
Have too
obviously,
much influence, isn't it? You're given what you
exactly,
can, and you can do little bits and pieces.
exactly.
Yeah.
And then we also have to think that a building is coming into a location, is it coming to a
Mm.
place? So it obviously depending on the site, but it should contribute to kind of placemaking and make the kind of the surrounding area nicer. So that sometimes it's not fully, let's say, it doesn't really. Yeah, doesn't necessarily mean that we'll have like our ideal orientation or our ideal or kind of perfect position
Mm.
for passive house. But then yeah, we kind of help the design team through all those initial stages, and then we go quite strong on form factor.
Yeah.
Uh, um, Kind of explaining kind of key decisions, even like inset balconies or
Mm.
complex kind of recesses or angles or things that
Yeah.
can
Limiting
real
junctions, limiting those thermal bridges at early stage. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, really early on. And because I think that the biggest advantage of Passivhaus is that it gives you a very clear target and gives you also very clear kind of methodology and kind of rules of thumb. So it's very easy to, from the get-going, to just like, okay, these are kind of the key core principles, and how we would like to see you kind of develop this massing. Yeah, and then obviously then it gets refined, let's
Yeah,
say.
no, that's really cool. So I guess because I know XCO2, there's the MEP arm and
Yeah,
the design. Do you generally get involved in? Is it normal to have both responsibilities on projects, or it depends? Like, what's your
it
general?
depends. It
Yeah,
depends. It depends on, I guess, on the appointment.
yeah,
On
yeah.
on quite a lot of the schemes, we are appointed the MEP team and a
Okay,
wider environmental scope, which
yeah.
is it's really helpful. So
Mm,
we have a lot of projects now that we are the Passivhaus consultant, the MEP consultant, but also we're doing overheating,
yeah,
daylight,
yeah.
um, and kind of part L kind of thing. So we
Mm.
can kind of cross synergies. I don't know,
And how
and
is
then it
that? How
ends
is
up
that
being
internally? Maybe not
huge
just XO2,
fights.
because I know, I mean, from my experience, it can be very complicated because
It can be very
there
complicated.
are different requirements. There's the part L target, there's the
Absolutely.
part O target, there's the passive. Yeah, go on. Sorry, you were
For
gonna.
example, infill sites that are surrounded by buildings, daylight is an issue.
Yeah.
So we have our daylight colleagues like enlarge the windows, increase the windows,
Yeah.
and then we're like doing the overheating assessment and like no, reduce the windows, and or doing
Yeah.
the energy balance, no, reduce the windows. So it's a lot of back and forth, and but it's sometimes things as where to place the windows, orientation of windows, for example, and all the architects that work with us get drilled to kind of avoid
Yeah, I've been there.
kind of ceiling, kind of floor to ceiling vertical
Yeah.
windows,
Yeah.
and kind of push them more into horizontal kind of like windows that provide maximum benefit for daylight, but avoid. So you're kind of just placing the windows on the kind of
Yeah.
the clever areas.
There's
But
there's so many. I mean, to the layman or to whoever, it's like, okay, a window's a window, right? But I think especially these days with like all of the different requirements, uh, I mean, from our experience on projects that we develop, the window is almost the critical
oh,
element in terms of
absolutely,
like all the things you've mentioned. So daylight, overheating, passive house, energy efficiency, security, architectural delight. Uh,
exactly.
among many other that I've missed. Um, it's so critical, and I guess I don't know if you found the same thing. It's like on projects, especially quite new stage two, let's say projects, the window design can take a long time in terms of
Can take
all
a
those
long time.
elements, and it's almost a critical path element or design element, right? And it's like yeah, it impacts so many things, and it's yeah, it's quite
And
interesting.
architecturally, it's so important because
Yeah.
it helps define, yeah, like the landscape, the visual landscape, and the fun, the massing, how it all kind of how it looks in a sense.
Mm.
But even like internally, like what's kind of the design and the experience, it's so important. Yeah, we do spend a lot of time on windows. Initially, we did send them our kind of ideal glazing ratios. So
Yeah.
trying to kind of tame the beast, like
Yeah.
from the early
Early
on, saying
stage.
like
Yeah.
we will tell you this. We will ask you to kind of look at the window glazing ratios and adjust, which can be super complicated because you have buildings with you know dwellings on multiple orientations, and there's a kind of an architectural language that needs to be respected. And yeah, even if your house faces kind of more on the north, whatever, west side, and then we're telling you reduce windows on that side, you don't want that house to have less windows, right? So it's
Mm.
it's um it's such a yeah, a balance. But look, that's what keeps the days interesting, because I think, to be honest, that's my favorite part.
That's the
It's
thing. I mean, I suppose
really
in your
supporting the
history,
design.
yeah, in the history, like
Yeah.
what you've mentioned before, you're professionally, early stage professionally, you were doing those compliance EPC ticks, and it's like you've gone from there to then this, which is like always different, always you know, a new challenge, right? And it's
Yeah.
like you're just trying to find the best solution that will actually have a good outcome, right? It's like,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
you want the best for the building, isn't it? It's like it's a different mindset, and yeah.
But being a multidisciplinary company team, it's so
Mm,
great. First,
yeah.
I think we save the years of architects and clients a lot because we do internal workshops and we do our
Yeah.
internal kind of discussions
Mm,
on how to advise the client because obviously we want to send a joint approach. It's
yeah.
not like the daylight says it wants this and then
You don't want to
over
argue in
here.
front of the client, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, we do like internal workshops, and I think we learn
Mm,
so much from each
that's
other.
perfect. That's really
So
great,
we
isn't it?
work so much with the MEP team, so we learn a lot about like what are the spatial requirements, what are like where do the ducts go, and all of that,
Mm,
and they can and they're always like at hand to explain. Yeah, but that doesn't work because yeah, blah blah blah, and it has to go this way and has to do this.
mm,
But we also influence them a lot, like say, well, but there's a noise issue on this side, or there's air quality issues on this side. So can we move like the intakes to this? So it's super collaborative process internally, and then always obviously when we kind of talk with architects and the clients, we're aligned. Let's say
yeah.
it would be weird if we're not, but yeah,
No, that's
but
that's
yeah,
really
yeah,
great. That's a really great like kind of message, isn't it? It's like you're a passive house expert in a multidisciplinary building services, sustainability, energy firm, and uh, yeah, I think that's almost a really great step, isn't it? Where we have more firms like XCO2, or, historically have that environmental design and building service background, sort of adding on passive house and not just having it as an add-on, but like having it almost integral to the way that you move forward with how you
yeah,
even think about design. Because I imagine, your MEP team now will look at Passivhaus scheme differently to they did maybe, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago,
absolutely, yeah,
before those workshops, before that, collaborative learning. And I suppose yourself as well, like on the MEP side, because your colleagues are telling you, X, Y, and Z are not possible for these reasons, we should do this. It kind of, you do get that exchange, isn't it, of learning and kind of progress, right?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely, absolutely. Although it doesn't really stop us, we don't all work on just XO2 projects. We work with many different other MEP consultants
yeah.
or daylight consultants, or
Mm,
so it really varies from project to project, and we always have this kind of collaborative approach, and I sense and I feel that it's particularly in the passive house world, it's very collaborative. I
yeah.
think people are all kind of interested in achieving the same goal and supporting each other.
Mm.
There's obviously the odd, I need more MVP space, I need more windows, I need that, but it's that's the debate.
No, exactly. I think,
Yeah.
yeah, we've come, like, from a contractor's point of view, we've come a long way from kind of like the initial feeling on passive house projects when maybe they're a little bit more niche of like, okay, well, based on experience, it's 10 to 15% more capex, and it's like,
Yeah.
guys, let's wait, because there are other like there are other regulations that maybe push us down more of a technological route where we have to put these, as I call them, like bells and whistles on the systems, which don't necessarily have the benefit. So if we focus on, a passive house design and following that process, because what I've certainly seen recently as well is, I think a lot of people go for Passivhaus principles as a buzzword, right? It's like, okay, we're gonna do the fabric,
Mm.
but we're not actually gonna do the certification. Passivhaus principles, it's horrible. I hate it when I see it. But anyway,
I
but
hate because I think it's yeah, sorry,
no,
keep
I
going.
was just gonna say it's the QA process. It's the idea that
Exactly.
there is a community. I find like there are the people who are really engaged in Passivhaus. They want it to perform well. Like they've almost,
Exactly.
in my opinion, they've got like the right intentions, and it's like we will look into the detailed design. So I've been surprised that a Passivhaus certifier has looked at a project at stage 2 and really done a deep dive into the design, into, okay, I completely understand what you've done here. Maybe for this thing, have you considered this? Like there does actually really feel like that collaboration, which which I think is quite nice to see because I sense that passion. It's like that passion of like we want it to perform well, and I think as more and more people are trained in Passive House or certainly have that experience of working on those projects and seeing the benefit, that that will create better outcomes organically, I hope. And I think it's just kind of accelerating that movement, isn't it? Of like, it's not, don't think about it as like an add-on that adds capital costs. Think of it more in the round. It's like, okay, you do all these things to the building. Yes, you may have to have high performance triple glazing. Yes, you have to spend more time on site to make sure the air tightness is correct. But by doing that, you have a happy client, you have a good reputation, but and you're doing the right thing, most importantly, but you're also not avoiding maybe these, as I call them, bells and whistles that you have to add to the building. You
Yeah.
don't have to add all of this, uh, in my opinion, sometimes unnecessary technology just to tick a box. You kind of you're kind of what we said earlier about you're creating a great building. The controls can be altered later, but you know that you're making that the biggest impact at the start.
Yeah, a few things on that. The passive house principles, yes. Ugh, yeah. uh, I think because people see it with the wrong angle. They
Yeah.
say they just look at like fabric Q values or kind of lower permeability, and they think that's. But the key passive house principle is control. It's quality control.
Yes.
So, and sometimes I even say that the kind of I told you, like my first love is building performance. But look, if the level of analysis and modeling and quality control on sites was done for, let's say, Part L kind of buildings, I would be happy.
Mm,
Because the
mm.
level of ambition currently on Part L, it's not huge. Let's say it could be better. Let's say, but it's
Yeah, yeah.
just to meet
Agreed.
Partel, you have to
Yeah,
do passive
yeah.
house type of
Fabric,
a
yeah.
fabric. You have to
Windows,
put
yeah, linen,
MVHR. You have to have
yeah,
some kind of low air permeability anyway,
yeah,
not to levels of passive house. But then it doesn't have that quality control, that quality check. So
yeah,
people don't really start with the end in mind. And I think that's the key change for on a passive house project. You start with that end in mind.
yeah,
So that's why you're saying they had like that certifier looking at stage two.
yeah,
I think there's a lot of thinking so early in the process that ultimately will result in a better building. So
yeah.
we have a lot of local authority clients very nervous on committing to certification because viability costs and all of that. And I
Mm,
say, look, even if you don't certify this, let's not drop the process.
yeah,
You can maybe see that later.
yeah,
We're planning, we're stage two, we're stage three. Let's not drop the goal. Let's get everyone still engaged in this process and because ultimately, okay, you drop passive house, you don't do it. You'll have a better building still.
yeah,
You'll have a building that was thought out, that look consider thermal bridging, consider form factor, consider fabric, consider all of like consider efficient services, location of the MVHR, reducing kind of all this kind of heat demand, and yeah, and then and then I'll go on the other steps and still try to keep the passive house there, and then
but
what?
you've done that robust
Yeah,
kind of
exactly.
deep dive at the most influential stage, the concept stages. And yeah, you're right. Like stage three, stage four, stage like there will be alterations, but in general, unless you want to do a complete redesign, which is never ideal, that stuff is still there. And you're
Exactly.
right, of course, still push it. But at least, you can't control other people, other stakeholders' views if they feel viability is an issue for rightly or wrongly. But yeah, at least you can almost sleep well to being like, right, but this is in a great place. They can't do too much bad with it from here. So,
Yeah.
maybe it won't get the tick, but in terms of the badge of the Passive House certification, but I wouldn't be surprised if when I look at the energy bills in a year, it's performing pretty well because
Yeah,
we've done all that.
exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
Exactly. And if even if you end up not being fully certified and the whole thing, it will be a low energy building. It will be efficient. A lot of the risk, and we also do a lot of work with cost consultants, understanding
Mm,
where they price things. And
exactly.
look, they're also working with the tools that they have at stage 2 and stage 3. It's very difficult to actually fully understand and fully also anticipate that risk that maybe contractors will price and all of that. And then maybe you can tell me how you look into that from a contractor point of view, because I think because of this quality control, the biggest issue we see on kind of how people are, I think they're the buying and the design, architects are in. I think that's kind of, I feel that that's a step that has been sort of like conquered. People like, okay, introducing
Mm,
look, well, ish, but I'm
yeah.
saying, and I'm feeling that sort of like the next step to sort of address is the delivery on site and air tightness mostly. That's
Oh
sort
yeah.
of like the biggest, let's say, scare that a lot of contractors have, that they're going to commit to something and then are we, can this happen? So we started doing air tightness training for
Mm,
contractors. So
mm,
not so we don't do air tightness testing on all of that, but engaging with the design teams on the air tightness line or
yeah.
tightness strategies. And that's again something that can be done so early on, stage 2, stage 3, is really thinking at some kind of junctions and seeing like, actually, how are we going to fit like a sort of like whatever membrane or board, or how is this going to be built?
Mm,
And I think that it's a sort of conversation that in typical partel buildings people don't have at that stage. They
yeah.
will think that on at stage 4. But then that might be quite late. You have a consented scheme and you're working with complicated detailing that it's hard to deliver on site, and it will be hard to deliver to passive house levels. So I think having that kind of early thinking of that. But yeah, but with contractors, yeah, yeah, it's something we're seeing. We get asked for a lot of like engagement and training on
That's great. Yeah.
what
I
what it means.
yeah. No. So the air tightness point, it hits a lot of bells to me, or want a better expression. But yeah, definitely from the contractor side, it's something that we've had to be on that journey. We like within we have this kind of USP that we've solved for a while, which is this kind of, we call it continental frame, whereby some of
Hmm.
the structure is in the walls, as opposed to just having flat slab with the columns providing the structure. And we found like where we're doing a continental frame without even having the passive house target. So let's say a typical project to London plan levels, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, we were getting air permeability of below 1
Oh
on
wow.
flats. And it's like, okay, that's great. Because, at the end of the day, you want to perform well. So it's like, okay, how did we get to that? We'll have like a flat slab construction that's more generally like a air permeability of 2.5. So let's say, it's okay, but we could do a lot better. And yeah, definitely as we're trying to push for more passive house projects, and in terms of just trying to have low energy buildings, it's definitely something that we've had to push internally. So myself and some of our colleagues in our technical department saying to management, to site directors, project directors, guys, we need to push the boundaries. We need to stop being afraid
Hmm.
of, oh, but what if the final test doesn't work? Because I think in the past, certainly when I joined Bouygues, and I think it's the case with a lot of contractors, let's say around 10 years ago, where you do the air test at the end. Oh no, if it's above 10, which
Yeah.
is very bad, oh, you have to do the filling, you have to do
Yeah.
the little bits that you can. And there hasn't been that thought through strategy of, okay, but let's just, in our cost plan early stage, let's put the air tightness tape in the base. Let's make sure the teams understand what it does and the benefit of it and program it in. And there are like these relatively small adjustments that make huge
Hmm.
impacts, and then you don't have to worry, the day of the air test, what's it going to be? Because you've, as you say, you've done those planned air tests. So like depending on the project, I know on a few projects where there's like a typical type of floor level or apartment level, you'll do like a sample flat or a sample area, do the air test before the main, once it's airtight, let's say, does it work? Like, what result are we getting? If it's bad, at least we just have to fix that one and then we air test it again. And then we have that robust example to show to
Yeah.
our subcontractors, everyone who's involved in that impacting the air test, what good
But
looks like,
yeah.
so then you can carry that on.
But what we see is that's a lot what sometimes the contractors charge more for, which I understand because it is more work. But like delays to the program, additional air tests, and all of that, and that then makes kind of clients a bit nervous, kind of committing to Passivhaus. So kind of in my ideal world, if I ruled the world, like this type of like quality check at the end would be mandatory for all buildings.
Yeah,
And
agreed.
you would have, okay, you say it's 3 air permeability, whatever, or 5 air permeability. So I'm not even talking about Passivhaus,
Mm.
but just demonstrate uh, that although you do, and I think now Partel includes every flat needs to be
Yeah.
have an air test. So hopefully that will drive, because before it would just be a sample and you just pick the best, let's say. Um, so yeah, but if you had all these kind of quality checks, actually, are the installation well done? Is the membrane, all of that? Yeah, that quality assurance is absolutely key.
Yeah, no, completely agree, and it's kind of it's that mindset shift. It's that idea that, you know, air testing, getting that air testing consultant or specialist on board early, will reap the rewards when it comes to making, you know, the program more efficient,
Yeah,
the construction more efficient. You won't have to go back and, you know, take things out and put them back. It just makes sense for so many reasons. And
yeah,
just linking on your quality point as well is something internally as well, like in terms of Bouygues, as a contractor, you're almost, you know, you're judged by what you provide. So, you know, there's this whole thing of, yeah, you have subcontractors that do the different packages, and but you're the face of it. So if there's something that goes wrong, even if it's not, you know,
yeah,
your fault, it's our building, and we have to, I think over time we've definitely found that, you know, we want to build things properly. We want to make sure everything is done correctly, and therefore, you know, you have to have those robust measures. Like that's why we have a TD, for example, to make sure, like, is everything correct? Is there any risks? Is there anything that we can optimize? Just as a sort of second pair of eyes, and in a similar way, almost to the spirit of the Passivhaus certifier, is having that um, extra pair of eyes, looking at it from a different angle, not being a blocker, but trying to be a helper, trying to, you know, constructively challenge
yeah.
things that maybe don't make sense. Because I think, you know, there's
Uh,
a reputational risk of, oh,
yeah.
oh no, everything's fine, but then, you know, at the end of the day, when you deliver a building, it performs or it doesn't. And, you know, you don't want to go back and start doing the blame game. You want to make sure, you know, everyone's right. If there's any concerns, let's deal with them, right? And that's
Yeah,
the,
and an air tightness champion, someone on
yeah.
site, kind of always sort of like keeping an eye, and then because there's so many trades and some contractors and all of that, so knowing your subcontractors, knowing your supply chain, kind of it's so crucial. Watch, yeah, I guess you know that. Um, I feel, yeah, I think it's contractors can get such bad rap, uh, uh, and I feel it's so unfair because ultimately there's so many people working in the industry and designing and planning and all of that, but ultimately it's the building that counts, and ultimately it's that the physical
Yeah.
thing is what matters. It doesn't really matter your drawings, your reports, all of that. It's the physical bit that matters. So yeah, when we work with a with an engaged contractor, and it's such a good experience in a sense, and we have quite a few a couple of buildings on site that we
Hmm.
are doing the Passivhaus consultancy on site, and it's so much work and it's so much engagement, but um, you can see also kind of the lessons learned from different contractors from other projects, and the kind of the internal kind of communication lines created, and also having like really good subcontractors. We have this project on site, and they subcontracted all the brickwork to this
Hmm.
Lithuanian company, and the work is amazing, so
Hmm.
well done. And and I remember like the guy was completely like baffled, like, yeah. what's special about this?
That's what I
This is
do.
this is what I do. This is how we do things in Lithuania. This is how I do things. And I'm like, well, you just do things well. Good. You should celebrate that. So but I think that can be the attitude. We don't need to
Yes.
think that it's
Yeah.
going to be super complicated. It's that this is how we do quality.
Yeah. Oh wow. Oh wow. This
Yeah.
this building performs. The energy bills are low. Yeah. What do
Yeah.
you expect? The Passive House project. That's what we do. Yeah. Like we should
Yeah.
have that same kind of.
It's what we
Yeah.
do. We do quality and it's true. It is difficult, and I think it should be paid, let's say, but it doesn't necessarily need to be. There's a lot of decisions and clever design decisions that don't necessarily mean that it needs to be more expensive
Exactly.
significantly, let's say.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a lot is talked about passive house. I think especially with people who really understand the process and been involved in the process and the kind of phrase of mindset. And I think, sometimes mindset is a buzzword, but I think to me anyway, it's like passive house. It's a really good way of looking at it. It is the
Yeah,
mindset shift. It's
you're
not,
right.
all right, I've got to do all these extra tasks. It's like, yes, you have to employ a passive house designer and the client has to employ a passive house certifier. Yes, that's true. That's additional
Yeah,
consultancy services that you wouldn't necessarily normally use. And yes, you have to look at passive house level windows because it's a crucial element in the passive house theory around making sure the internal temperatures are not too low. Um, but in the round, it's really more about thinking in a certain way. Like I always try and push it with Bouygues as well because we have a real, as I said, real quality emphasis and we have quality team and all that, and they should be they're interlinked. It's like when
yeah,
we deliver a
absolutely.
Passive House project, our quality team should always be like, right, that's a Passive House one, so we know that one is will be in good hands because quality is paramount. It's these other projects, maybe with not that same target, that we have to almost take those passive house approaches in terms of quality and attention to detail to those other projects that don't have the same aim, if that makes sense. So it's like
Yeah.
we're in good hands in this one. Let's take that same approach on this one. Ideally, we want everything to be to that standard. But yeah, that's kind of like the mindset, isn't it?
Because even for a
Yeah,
contractor, having that quality check and all that, like it's a benefit. It's
yeah,
more it's you protecting your future,
yeah,
like defect period and all
yeah,
of that. That maybe you will have less stuff or none,
yeah,
hopefully,
yeah,
to actually fix and repair. So it's sort of like early investment. And I think you're right. It's you can take all those lessons learned from past house buildings and just apply quality to everything,
yeah,
in a
yeah.
sense. Um, and yeah.
And yeah, and I guess it's just long-term thinking, isn't it? It's going away from that idea of, oh, okay, I see all of the uh, potential additional costs, whatever it is, complication. But actually, if you think in the longer term, do I want to deliver a good building? Do I want to be proud of what I delivered? It just makes sense. It just makes sense to take all of those because they're little additional things, or not necessarily additional things, but different ways of thinking about things, and
Yeah.
then you get a better result, don't you? Um,
Even
yeah,
with things when we're discussing, should we target passive house, should we not target passive house, and then does it really need such a big thermal break? And I was like, okay, what's the alternative? Are you telling me, okay, let's not do passive house, let's design this with thermal bridging? No, right? We're not like
because then
ultimately.
maybe you get the condensation, maybe you get
Yeah,
the
exactly.
mold. I mean,
Yeah.
there's so many things that it can benefit and also prevent from happening. Like there's so many buildings where, even though if they're new, they have these kind of defects of like Dunn Bridge, Cold Bridge, and then that we have a mold epidemic in this country,
Yeah,
and
but this kind of making people think, okay, you don't want passive house, so are you saying I try to kind of reframe it.
yeah,
Passive house is not complicated. We're just having these conversations much earlier
yeah,
on the process than you
mm,
maybe typically would be. But it's
mm,
the same thing. At stage 4, you would be doing your thermal bridging assessment and you'll be trying to sort it. So let's just actually try to design that out.
yeah.
And so it's not that now we're targeting this standard that is really complicated. No, we're just thinking. It just gives you this framework and this methodology and this guidance to think through the building and make it more energy efficient. And yeah, I don't know. Maybe I am a bit more evangelical than I thought, but yeah,
I think we all are, right, in this space. Anyway, I've
yeah.
taken a lot of your time, Sarah, and honestly, I
Oh
really
yeah, true.
appreciate
Yeah.
this chat. I think it's been fantastic. We could probably
Mm.
chat for a few more hours. But yeah, like thank you so much for your time. It's really great, I think, to see companies like XCO2 embracing passive house design and all of the great work that you're clearly doing in that space. I suppose as maybe as a final thought, where where would you like to see your role or in terms of the passive
Mm.
house journey? Where do you see it maybe in a few years? Do you do you see it becoming? Do you think it'll ever become the norm? Do you think it'll ever become almost like a regulation that we can choose to do it this way and then we avoid having to do other things? Like what's your dream coming forward with regards
To
to
passive
buildings and stuff?
house.
Yeah.
Uh, so I love passive house. I don't think it's necessarily the solution for all buildings.
Mm,
So I don't think it should be forced, let's say. I would like to see building regulations adopt a much more a kind of stringent approach. Well, one to performance,
mm,
and but also kind of fabric levels, air tightness levels, quality control, and also let's say a better methodology than SAP to evaluate all of this.
mm.
There's a lot of discussions. Is it fabric first, fabric fifth, whatever? Um, um, if we decarbonizing the grid, do we really have to reduce energy demand? I'm a firm believer that we do. We do
Mm,
need to reduce energy demand because it's likely only going to increase overall kind of
yeah,
the energy needs.
yeah.
So I think kind of keeping the grid healthy, let's say,
Mm, mm,
with less energy demand, the best. So I think I would like to see uh, that kind of be pushed, and the things of like the UK net zero building standard and kind of that really focus on the performance and
mm.
then on results being more pushed, because there's a lot of talk about ambition and things, but I think it's the delivery that's
Yeah.
the key, and it's the delivery, it's the complicated bit. But so kind of having this um uh like higher drive
Mm.
from the government into kind of quality and into performance.
More
That's
ambition, more kind of,
more ambition.
yeah,
Where
yeah,
I think the Passivhaus Standard 8 fits really well, and it's a
yeah.
great tool. Um, yeah, but and could very easily be applied to the majority of the buildings. And then where it can't for multiple reasons, there's variations. There's the low energy building standard. There's the ACB standard.
Mm.
There are kind of um, let's say I don't know, these more relaxed, but like different level, different kind of standards that still really focus on this um, building performance goal,
Mm.
delivering what's in the tin, highly energy efficient building, and buildings that really provide great levels of indoor comfort and health. Because we didn't touch on that, but that's a massive benefit from a passive house building. It's just the indoor comfort it's great.
It's
Good air
those things, yeah,
quality,
it's those things you
good
can't measure, isn't
comfort.
it? It's like,
Yeah.
it's, you know,
You can
I
measure. You can
no,
measure. We
you're right.
measure.
You
We.
can measure it. No, no, you're right. I should rephrase what
Yeah.
I say. What I mean is, you won't necessarily measure it in the energy
True.
bills,
Yeah.
but you're
Exactly.
completely right. It's
Exactly.
like in terms of the health of a population,
Exactly. Yeah.
you know, we epidemic of lung conditions and different things related to poor quality housing, and if we can, if you take energy out of it, so assume, oh, there's no benefit, which there is, there's an additional benefit to health.
Exactly.
It's the indoor air quality, it's the thermal comfort, it's also because Passive House looks at overheating a check, even though you know we do other overheating checks,
Yeah.
but it identifies that again at early stage. So yeah, I mean,
The
we'll probably have a
acoustic
part two on
comfort
health,
is
but
they're just so
acoustic comfort,
quiet.
yeah.
It's yeah. Yeah, I think. Well, I guess I don't know when this is gonna go live, but I think yeah, you could kind of people should just try to visit Passivhaus buildings. There's gonna be
Yeah,
the Passivhaus open days,
yeah,
and people just should try to see how they kind of work and
yeah, yeah.
and there should be a Passivhaus Airbnb for people to just like
Yeah, the option.
spend
Yeah, ticket. Yes or no
spend
to Passive
yeah,
House. Yeah,
exactly.
yeah, yeah,
Spend some holidays on a Passivhaus
yeah.
and see the benefits. Uh,
Perfect. All right.
anyway,
Well, thank you,
thanks.
Sarah.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
No
And
worries. It's
yeah,
wonderful to get your thoughts, and yeah, it's
lovely
definitely
to
been.
chat.
Yeah, exactly. So there we go. I will.